Hey BookTube, Chelsea the Reading Outlaw here to do my wrap up for the Book Buddy-a-thon. Oh yeah, it was a really good week. I did not get through all 5 books, but if you'll remember from my TBR video, I didn't really think I was going to get through all 5 books. I did get through 3.5 though, and so for one week, I feel like that's a pretty good round of reading. So let's talk about the books. The first one I read over Mother's Day weekend, and that is The Blue Girl by Lori Foos. This book is about a lakeside town where mothers bake their secrets into moon pies and feed them to a girl who is literally blue. Her skin, her hair, everything is a very dark mottled shade of blue. And then the kids find out that this is happening, and the kids get involved, and the secrets kind of start to tear this very small town apart. It is a literary fiction novel. I thoroughly enjoyed it. The writing is absolutely beautiful. It's a very small story, not a lot necessarily happens, but at the same time, there are lots of conversations and lots of thinking done about motherhood, being in a town where you feel trapped, the differences between mothers and their children. There are also a lot of good instances of diversity in this book. You have the Blue Girl, which brings up questions of race and naturalism and cause and effect. There are also characters in this book who are both physically and mentally disabled, and so there are good conversations about ableism and what it means to be crazy and how craziness and insanity and depression can affect a family. It wasn't like the best book that I've ever read. There were definitely sometimes more questions than there were answers. Not that that always necessarily bothers me in a book, but I really thoroughly enjoyed the concept, and damn, this book made me want a moon pie so bad. So bad. I highly recommend it. I ended up giving it 4 stars on Goodreads. The next book that I finished was the Memoirs of Lady Trent. I had this physically, but I also listened to it on audiobook. I kind of went back and forth. I'm glad that I had the physical copy because there are pictures. And for those of you who don't know, Lady Trent is a famous dragon naturalist in a fantasy world that mimics kind of our Victorian world and England especially. There is no England in this book. He is from a place called Screeland, but it is very much so. There are clear parallels between the worlds, and she ends up going to what would in our world essentially be like an Eastern European country to study dragons. For those of you who are thinking about picking up this book, do know going into it, the dragons are not necessarily the mythical beasts of lore that you are used to. They are considered and treated like almost any other animal. And Lady Trent is a naturalist, and so she is studying how they breed, where they live, what their mating life is like, what their mourning life is like, all of these different kind of aspects of the animal kingdom as it pertains to dragons. There's also a political element in this book and some political machinations and a little bit of a whodunit mystery kind of thing. I really enjoyed this book. The premise of this book is that she is in her old age and is started to write her memoirs to deal with people who are constantly asking her kind of sensationalist questions about what it's like to be a dragon hunter or a dragon naturalist. This book is more about ladies in science and how frustrating and how rewarding it would have been to be a pioneer woman in a scientific field than it is about like mysterious dragons, Khaleesi type magic. This is a fantasy book, but it's very much so almost a fantasy of manners in that the fantasy pertains only to the fact that there are dragons. And like I said, the dragons are treated very much so like any other member of the animal kingdom. If you get the chance to listen to it on audio, I would highly, highly recommend picking it up. The audiobook reader does a fantastic job. She's very British and very, very well spoken. And I ended up giving this book 5 stars on Goodreads. The next book that I finished was the group read, and that is Human Acts by Han Kang. I read The Vegetarian back in, I think, February and was absolutely obsessed with it. I read it with Brittany and with Jean from Jean's Bookish Thoughts. And this is the second book that she has written. This one is very, very different. This follows many more viewpoints than The Vegetarian did, and it is about the South Korean student uprisings in 1980 in South Korea. And it follows members of the student body population who was a part of the uprising. We get a chapter from the kind of disembodied spirit of somebody who was killed in the uprising. And then we kind of follow throughout history the ripple effect of this one event on all of these different lives. I This is not one of those books that you can really say that you enjoyed because it's incredibly difficult. I am glad that I read it, and there were definitely points in this book that were worthy of very deep discussion and consideration. There are very good discussions about death and the body and how different cultures react to death and the physicality of death and the body. There are scenes of torture, so trigger warnings if, abject violence and torture really bother you, then please know going into it that that is definitely an aspect that plays in here. I had some difficulties with this book. I did not enjoy it as much as I enjoyed The Vegetarian, and I think that's because it is very disjointed. As we move both from different perspectives and throughout time, things are very, very almost disconnected. I was talking to Brittany and Rachel about it, and Brittany said she almost thought it would function better less as like a novel than it would as a set of interconnected short stories in terms of how to market it, and I would fully agree with that. I spent a lot of time at the beginning of kind of each chapter figuring out where we were in the timeline, who was who, how they had been related to the previous people we were reading about, if at all. And I think that the beauty of the writing is a testament to the translator. This is translated by Deborah Smith. And one of the most interesting parts of the book for me was actually a translator's note at the beginning in which she talks about how English lacks a variety of words for death and corpses in the way that the South Korean language does, and how to kind of translate that and keep the spirit of that when your own language faces a lack of vocabulary. And I thought that that was just incredibly, incredibly interesting. I ended up not rating this on Goodreads because I'm not entirely sure how to rate it. I think that as a book, it didn't function super well for me, but thematically and in terms of the content, it is still an incredibly important read. So I would definitely recommend picking it up. I would actually, if you're going to pick up a Han Kang, would recommend that you pick up The Vegetarian, but I still am really glad that I read this book. And lastly, the half book I read, the book I got halfway through, was Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I will be finishing this up today, although we are technically outside of the realm of the Book Buddy-a-thon, so it won't count for that. But like I said, I got about halfway through it. It is very ominous and very creepy. So far, it's not scaring me as much as I was hoping it would, and people have told me that it would, but I have a pretty high bar when it comes to horror. But it's definitely very unsettling. I read it and I get this instant feeling like I feel like I want to take a blindfold off, and I'm not wearing a blindfold, if that makes sense, because everybody in this book, you can't look outside. The premise of this book is that there is some thing outside that if you see it will cause you to go crazy, and you will either kill the people who are around you, or if there's no one around you, you will kill yourself. And so because nobody knows what it is and everybody who sees it ends up killing themselves, there's just no confirmed reports of what exactly it is that's causing this insanity. So nobody looks outside. Everybody outside wears a blindfold. But Mallory, it goes back and forth in time between when she first starts experiencing this kind of epidemic of insanity, and she finds out that she's pregnant right at the same time. And then we flash forward, half a dozen years, and she is leaving her safe house with the kids, and she's leaving. She's going on the river. She's taking a canoe. She's trying to find more people and more sanctuary, but of course she's blindfolded. And so it's very much so like an oppressive, like I want to rip her blindfold off. I want to be able to see, even though I can see, which is a very weird feeling. So it's definitely very unsettling, and it's very creepy. I'm hoping that it ramps up the horror aspect a little bit, maybe as we get closer to finding out exactly what happened to all the people she was living with and now why she has to leave. But yeah, I'm leaning towards like a 3.5 star, maybe 4-star book, unless it just really ramps it up in the latter half, which could absolutely happen. So that is my wrap up for the Book Buddy-a-thon. Thank you so much to Brittany and Rachel for participating with me. I loved reading with you ladies. I love you ladies very much. Rachel, I loved getting to know you. Brittany, you're my BFF for life, girl. You're my girl. You're my gal. I hope everybody who participated had a good time reading with their buddy and got to read some new books and some good books that they were looking forward to. Let me know down below if you've read any of these, if you have comments, questions, concerns. I am all over social media as always, and I'm always here to talk books. All right, guys, happy reading, and I love you all.